Mary Glasgow is the interim Chief Executive Officer of Scotland's National children's charity, Children First. Their vision: safe for children, stronger families, resilient communities. Right now, we're going to hear from Connection to Purpose. This is the story of an organisational approach to understanding ourselves and ACEs. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mary Glasgow.
Hello. Thank you for your lovely kind faces. It does a lot for the old self-regulation system. I'm thrilled to be here and very privileged and humbled to tell you a bit of a story, to offer you some insights into the journey that we've had at Children First. Started about 4 years ago when we were curious, I suppose, as an organisation about where we'd got to. We're a third sector organisation, children's charity, been around for 134 years. But like many organisations, we found ourselves thinking, how did we land up here? What are we for? Are we even needed? Do Scotland's children even need an organisation like Children First? And we began to get curious about the place that the third sector, if you like, and the charity sector had got to. I guess at times we got very curious and challenging of ourselves and began to think, like a lot of organisations, had we lost our purpose? Had we lost that moral purpose that John Swinney talked about? And for us, that we understood how that might have happened in our sector. So it's difficult to survive as a children's charity in Scotland. Most of my colleagues from the third sector in the audience will recognise that. We begin to get lots of people say to you when you work in a children's charity, well, you all do the same thing. Why don't you just join up together, save some money and just do your stuff together, which is not a bad idea. So we reflected on that, we thought about that, and we began to think about, let's get curious about our organisation. What are we for? How did we get here? How is it that sometimes when we get into contracting relationships with local authorities, we end up looking like local authorities and sounding like local authorities? We're the third sector, we're a children's charity, we exist to change children's lives, we exist to do what children need us to do, not what everybody else wants us to do. So on that basis, we got really, really curious about our own organisation, and we've been on a bit of a I hate to use the term, but it is a bit of a journey and we're not finished yet. So I'm just going to offer you some insights into that, and I hope that they help. They may not, lots of you will already be doing some of what we've done. So I just share this in the spirit of that collaboration that other colleagues have talked about. Just a word of Children First. There are nearly 40 of my colleagues and family members that we support in the audience, and they'll give me a really hard time if I don't take this opportunity to tell you a bit about Children First. We've been around for 134 years, and our core purpose, and we found it in these documents 4 years ago when we began to get curious about what we were for. Our core purpose has always been to prevent adverse childhood experiences, to prevent the abuse and neglect of children, to protect children and keep them safe from harm, and to help children and their families to recover. And when we looked at these documents, it talked about building strong families. It talked about, in a language that GIRFEC and all of these other lovely policies, these beautiful policies that we have in children, we looked at this document and we thought, how did we lose a sense of what our moral purpose is? Because it's been there the whole time. So that really galvanised us and got us excited about what this new journey could look like. One of the first things that we did was we connected. We've heard a lot about connection today. We talked with intent about connection. Connection to our moral purpose, to our core purpose as an organisation, connection with each other, to all of the members of staff, all of the volunteers who work alongside us, and especially to all of those children that we work with and their families who tell us and share their stories and share their experiences and tell us very clearly what it is that needs to happen and what they would want us to do with them. And that's really helped us to get a sense of what we're for, why we're here, why we do this work. So once we'd connected as an organisation, and we did a number of things in order to help us do that, we got a bit of a tribe round us. We knew we couldn't really do it together, on our own, sorry. We know that we needed to look to some of the experts in the field, some people who, the scientists, the people who really understand the connection science, that really gave us the courage and the confidence to take this on. So we got Suzanne in 4 years ago to come and deliver attachment training. Connection for us was really about attachment, really about understanding each other, ourselves, and the families that we support. We trained all of our staff. We trained all of our board members. We had our volunteers in. We got some family members that we support alongside us so that everybody understood why this was important. And that really quickly developed, and much faster than I think we even anticipated, this sense of connection and a shared purpose. Simon Sinek's already had a mention earlier. We like a TED Talk at Children First. There's so many brilliant people, including Nadine Burke Harris on TED, and we try and start our sessions, our development sessions, with a TED Talk. And this is one of the best ones in the early days that really helped us, which was about giving us the confidence to start with your why. Really think about why you do what you do, not what you do. And that was incredibly helpful to the whole organisation because it again reinforced that notion about purpose. What are you for? What do people need you to be doing? So, here's what the ACES movement did for us. We'd already been thinking about, as an organisation, what was our purpose, what did children in Scotland need us to do, what do families want us to do. We work a lot to prevent childhood adversity. We have a major role around the recovery of adversity for both children and for adults. And we have another significant aim in our organisation, which is to change public policy and practice, to challenge the whole country to do what's right for children. And we're not the biggest organisation. We're only 200 members of staff, just short of that. We've got about another 100 volunteers. We're not the biggest organisation, but that second core purpose that we've got, to change public policy, to be the voice of the children that we support, is why we really welcomed this movement. Because for 134 years, we've been trying to achieve this stuff. We've been trying to stop children living in adversity. In 2 years, this movement has done what we've not been able to do in 134 and what a whole bunch of other organisations have not been able to do. So what the ACES movement did for us was to give us the courage, the evidence, the support, the backdrop, the movement to be able to take forward what we knew to be true, what we'd always known to be true. Because we'd found ourselves in a funny place, hadn't we? And I'm sure lots of us will recognise this. And I say this with forgiveness for us, because I know we've spent a lot of time thinking it was about evidence-based programmes. There'll be a number of folk in the audience. I mean, I don't know how many times in my varied career as a social worker, as a third sector manager and then leader, where people have said, could you do parenting, please? I don't know how you do parenting. We found ourselves in a position where we were doing things to families that was not helping. We were pretending that they weren't like the rest of us, that they loved their children a wee bit differently, or they needed to be taught something in a different way. And what the ACES movement has done for us is to give us the courage to really get comfortable with what we all inherently know is the truth, which is we know this stuff. We know and have always known that what happens to us when we're children affects all of us for the whole of our lives. And the ACES movement gave us the confidence to really garner our organisation around that simple truth and try and do something about it. It encouraged us to be courageous. I don't need to tell you, I'm sure, how much courage it takes for children and for family members to be in a relationship with family support staff, teachers, doctors, and share their most personal troubles. So one of the things that we took from that was, if we're expecting the people that we support, if we expect children and families to talk to us about their most precious and painful experiences, we need to think about who we are, and we need to think about what being in relationship with those families really means. It's not about them. We've heard that all day. It's not about those folk over there. It's about all of us. So in our organisation, we started to get curious about us. How have we behaved? How do we When we talk about the relationships that we're in with the families, what does that really look like? Because what it really looks like is that the families we support, the children we support, we get to know them really, really well. We get to know their strengths, we get to know their challenges, we get to know their pain, we get to know their dreams and their hopes. But we also need to let them get to know us well as well. So one of the things that we talk about in our organisation is bring your whole self to work. You have permission in our organisation to bring your whole self to work. Not just the bits that we trained you in, not that just the processes and the systems and the outcomes and all the recording that we expect you to do, but the single biggest utility you've got is you. So bring that, all of it, into work, and we'll help you practice in that way. For us, culture has been everything. This has started with organisational culture change. It started with us, and we talk about that all the time at Children First. And we practice some really simple things in order to constantly think about what does culture mean? What does being a connected, engaged culture mean for the members of our staff, for volunteers? It doesn't matter if you work in the IT department or in the family support team or in the finance team. Everybody in Children First knows that if you join our organisation, you're there because you care about what matters to children and families. And the bit that you play in that, the job that you've got, is just as important as any other job. We talk about taking a restorative approach, which is a way of being with people. It's a shift in the system from doing to people, which we've all done. We've reflected incredibly honestly and painfully about some of the things, some of the practices, some of the models, some of the approaches that were about wagging their finger at parents and telling them they just needed to do better. And we've stepped right away from that, and we've made a conscious and intentional decision to only do those things that understand that it's about what's happened, that we've all got a story, and that story and the impact of that story affects all of your relationships, including the most important ones, those relationships with your child. So we've moved to this notion of a restorative practice culture, and we've trained all of our staff in that. We've shifted our language from language that was quite transactional, service user, to the people that we support. We've thought very intentionally about language, because language is powerful and it others people, and so we've really used that to help us think about that. We've focused on the learning of our staff, our volunteers, our families. We've got family members that we support in the audience today. And the other thing I would really want to talk a bit about is this notion that we've heard that ACEs is somehow potentially stigmatising or labelling or pathologising individuals, and that it doesn't really take account of some of those larger structural inequalities that impact on families. And one of the things I would want to say is that I don't think that's the case, but I do think that structural inequality does start with personal trouble before it becomes a public issue. And what the ACEs movement has allowed us to do is to hear very powerfully those voices that say, these are the reasons that I'm not able to contribute to society, as John Swinney was talking about. This is why I don't have a job and pay taxes, because I've been so overwhelmed with adversity and with the impact of trauma caused by early childhood experiences that I'm not in a place where I'm able to do that. And if you don't understand that, and all you do is shame and blame and make me feel bad about it, all I'll do is transmit that through the next generation. So it's really helped us think about the links between our individual relationships with children and the parents that we support, and taken those voices and amplified them and made sure that we push that to the government in terms of this is a public issue that you need to address. So ACEs are a personal, painful experience for individuals, but they're also the opportunity to change structural inequality and to redefine what a welfare state might look like for children who need to recover from adversity in early life. The main thing that the ACEs movement's done for us is given us confidence and courage, personal courage. For those of you that know you and your kind faces are beaming out at me, I see you, thank you very much. I don't find it easy to stand on a stage and talk to 2,000 people. In fact, it's incredibly intimidating. But one of the privileges and responsibilities of being the interim CEO at an organisation like Children First is it's not really about me. It's about every child and parent that we've worked with who will never get a chance to stay on this, to stand on a stage like this, and just be their voice, just be their mouthpiece, and that's what I intend to do. But the main thing, thank you. The main thing it's given us is hope, that actually, you know, you get a bit tired after 134 years as an organisation. It's completely rejuvenated this organisation and given us a huge amount of hope. It's also given the people that we support, every child, every family member, hope that people are now listening and paying attention and are prepared to do something about it. One of those people is in the audience today, and she doesn't want me to identify her by name. But this is what she said, and this is where I do think, you know, my responsibility is just to speak her truth and to represent her courage in the best way that I can. She wrote a blog for us at Children First this week. We've published it. You can see it on our Facebook page and on our Twitter feed, and demonstrated with the most eloquent courage, much better than I could, the link between poverty, inequality, and her early childhood experiences. So she says, living with these experiences means that you are so desperate to make sure that your own children have a better life that you can forget all about yourself and can drive yourself into depression and feeling inadequate. It can affect your relationships with others and can affect the way you think about money and budgeting. It means being desperate to try to have as much money as you can, which often leads to large amounts of debt, to try and keep up with everyone else and to make sure that your own children have the things that you didn't. So there's sometimes a lot of concern about the ACES movement that doesn't take account of poverty, and actually the links between poverty, adversity and trauma, it's really important that we get that. It's really important that we recognise the movement does get that. This is not about individual difficulty. This is about a public issue, a public health issue that we need to address. I just want to say thank you to the mum who's in the audience today, and I said to her, when I'm up there, I want you to imagine yourself, that's your voice up there. Thank you very much for your courage. I'm not going to labour this point because we've talked about it all day, but the single biggest thing that the ACES movement's done for us is give us the courage and the evidence to talk about relationships, to talk about meaningful relationships. They are the thing that we use. That's the utility by which we will change children and families' lives. Authentic, genuine, kind, compassionate relationships. But in the work that we do work with people who have had such incredible adversity that they're not always able to give their children the relationships that they need right away. So we also talk about a high support, high challenge culture and relationships within the organisation and out with the organisation with the people that we support. It's about having the courage, the compassion, the care to be able to say to people some of the really hard stuff in order that they hear that, but do it with support, with kindness, and walk alongside them while they try and address that and make things better for their children. But relationships are an evidence-based programme, and I'm delighted that we're finally beginning to recognise that. And I think the science behind the adverse childhood experiences, a lot of what Nadine's talked about around that buffering, has really galvanised us. Because when I first came to Children First and talked to some of our staff, they would talk about having a lack of confidence when they would go into child protection arenas or the children's hearing system, because they would say, well, it's not that clever what we do, or we don't really have a fancy language to describe it. And now we have a language of relationships that's given every one of those people the confidence to talk about what really matters to the children and families that we support. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. The other thing I want to talk about is the UNCRC, a thing of great beauty in my view. This is a children's rights issue. And if we really think about the UNCRC, and I'm delighted that the Scottish Government are moving to full incorporation of the UNCRC, not before time, we will get this right. We will make a real difference. I just want to read something from the UNCRC to you. It says, and I'm just going to cut this a bit short because time's tough, but that the child, for the full and harmonious development of his or her personality, should grow up in a family environment in an atmosphere of happiness, love and understanding. That's what we've been talking about all day. If we implement fully and really think about the UNCRC, then we will deliver what our ambition is. So at Children First, it really galvanised us around saying we take a child rights approach to everything. Children's rights to live in their own families. And if their own families are challenging, those families have a right to the support that they need to overcome those challenges at a much earlier stage than we currently offer it. Juliet Harris from Together, which is a wonderful children's rights organisation, has another thing of beauty, which is Miss Kendra's List from the Resilience film, set alongside all of the UNCRC articles. And one of the things that they talk about, no child should be kicked or punched. Well, that's Article 19 of the UNCRC, no child should be hurt. And she's got a brilliant way of describing the UNCRC through going through Miss Kendra's List, which is incredibly helpful, and you'll get it on the Together website. The other thing that it's done for us is helped us make that sense of, we used to think that prevention started over here and recovery was over here, and now what we know is it's not a continuum, it's a cycle. We really need to intervene earlier, we need to prevent families experiencing, children experiencing adversity in the first place, and the best way we can do that is to help the adults in their lives to recover from what happened to them. So we know in Scotland there is a shocking lack of support to help people overcome their childhood traumas. It just does not exist. We've been trying really hard to make sure that there is support for that, but we know that it's a real gap. If we can get alongside families and put children, if we can be child-centred and family-minded, remember that children live in families, families live in communities, and offer families and communities the support that they need to recover from what they've experienced, we know that's the best way that you can prevent adversity being passed on. It's the best way to protect children and keep them safe. I have to finish now. I just want to say two things. We talked a wee bit about all the tools that we've used. So there are lots of things that we don't do at Children First, lots of approaches that we go, do you know what, that's not trauma sensitive, we don't want to use that. We want to talk about kindness and compassion. You'll know a bit about our Trauma Teddies initiative with Police Scotland, which has gone viral and has been an indicator of how kind Scotland and its communities are. We are inundated with hand-knitted teddies that say to children, we see you, we hear you, we notice you, we care about you. And police officers carry these teddies about in their cars, and when children have experienced some traumas, they hand them over. And on the back of that T-shirt, there's a phone line where their parents can access a kind, caring volunteer through Parent Line, which will talk them through what's happened and give them some support to help them be alongside their child as they recover. And the other tool that's been important to us, and I know that there are many fans of Kitbag in the audience. Margaret Hanna is in the audience, who's the lead developer of Kitbag. Kitbag's not something that we do with children or families alone, it's something that we do with ourselves. So it's a tool for self-regulation. I took a card, it was courage, just before I came on here. We do a mindful minute at the start of all our meetings. We make sure that all of our organisation is as regulated as it possibly can be, so that when we get alongside the children and families we support, we take calm. We take calm into the living rooms of every family that we work with. And just finally, one of the most important things, and one of the things that took quite a lot of courage that we did this year, was ask the question, are we truly becoming a trauma-sensitive organisation? Are where we need to be? So one of the things we decided to do was do a survey in the organisation with some PhD students from Edinburgh University, and we did a survey across all of our staff volunteers at Children First. And here's what we learned. We learned that our own staff have already experienced adversity, so you can see the statistics there. And you take a deep breath when you look at that and you ask yourself, what does that mean for the families that we support? Are we an organisation that's regulated enough? And what we've found is that by implementing policies, a way of being that's trauma sensitive and aware, our staff are not overwhelmed. They have experienced adversity, as you can see, but they feel regulated, they feel calm, because the organisation that they operate in recognises what that means. So that's really helped us too. And here's just one of the findings of that survey, that the organisation culture was fundamental to staff working in a trauma-informed way, and that the staff approach was identifiably trauma-informed. So we've taken some really clear steps at Children First to think about how ACEs can galvanise us as an organisation, what being trauma-informed really means, and what it's meant for us is really having a good, hard, brave look at ourselves. Forgiving ourselves for some of the mistakes that we've made, and giving permission to ourselves to really invest in the things that the science now tell us work: relationships, kindness, compassion. Thank you very much. I'm going to just finish with the words of one of the parents that's in the audience. I've talked too much, as I always do, but I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Glasgow.